Upon reflection, I have realized that I use two main types of analysis on this channel. I believe all story analysts use at least one. The first is pattern analysis. This is where I start with a feeling and then look for patterns in the story that could potentially explain why I have that feeling. A great example of this would be the secret to writing power escalation. I knew there were power creeps that I liked and those that I didn't. I gathered examples and put them into two groups. Then I looked for patterns among both. The result was the do's and don'ts for writing power escalation. I did a similar thing for how to write a battle shonen magic system. I took a bunch of systems and broke down what I believed to be the patterns that were most necessary. Then I explained the extra features that were occasionally present. This is what a majority of writing YouTubers use in my experience, especially on the anime side. The second is rubric analysis. This is where I have an established rubric and grade the story based on how well it fits the rubric. Any video involving story theory, my charts, or screenwriting books falls under this. Talk No Jutsu is a flat arc, the theme videos, and the fight videos do that. All rubric analysis is technically rooted in pattern analysis, but the difference is that once the rubric has been set in stone, it's the one and only metric. Very few writing YouTubers use this. Both of these have strengths and weaknesses. The weakness of pattern analysis is that it has no real foundation in what counts as good or bad writing. You can argue anything to be good or bad based off your feelings alone. This allows people to dive into Candyland, where every story is good in its own way and nothing should be criticized. The strength of rubric analysis makes up for that. It has a solid understanding of what counts as good writing and what doesn't. Following the rubric ensures objective writing quality. The weakness of rubric is how rigid it is. There are many times where a story is extremely enjoyable to me, despite it not scoring well in the rubric. I often call this swagger or X factor because rubric analysis can't compute how that's happening. The strength of pattern analysis makes up for that. Because it's so loose, it allows me to explain uncommon writing skills that a rubric couldn't comprehend. I never quit pattern analysis, but it feels like my focus on rubric analysis has limited the creativity and the vast types of patterns I could find. One major thing that limited my pattern analysis was my idea of good writing versus bad writing. I already had ideas in my head for what was good and looked for patterns to support it instead of just looking for patterns for the sake of it. What inspired me to do this was an old One Piece Reddit post analyzing how the story writes fights. I saw it years ago, but when reading it, I noticed how the author wasn't looking for anything that was good or bad. He was just presenting the patterns that were there. You can see this change in my fight video. I was dead set on my rubric for grading fights, which was tactics that made sense. But when I let go of my rubric, I was able to notice patterns in non-tactical fights that allowed them to be enjoyable without tactics. It also indirectly allowed me to break down tactics even more, which then allowed me to explain the problem I had with sports anime. The release of the rubric allowed me to understand boring stories. 3 years ago, a patron asked me to make a video on how to make a first chapter, but back then, I had this notion that there's no such thing as a perfect first chapter. But now, I was able to put that opinion to the side, narrow down the scope to a battle manga, and analyze the objective patterns there to create a video that I believe was helpful. I'm not abandoning rubric analysis, but I am expanding the reach of my pattern analysis to see things that I never considered. By putting my rules aside and analyzing patterns based on facts or my personal enjoyment, I'm now able to see the beauty in things that I may not have liked before. This is the end of Fuyu Rendan 2. Hopefully you enjoyed. Keep learning, Ubarians.